Well, hello everyone, and thank you very much for joining and having a look at our talk today. I'm very excited to have Michael Campbell back again in our series of All About Horses. Today, we're going to talk about a fairly, I say, a broad subject. It encompasses many health factors. Makes it quite broad, I think. But I'm going to let Michael tell you about that. He is an equine expert. If he doesn't know it about horses, nobody does. So he's going to introduce us to the missing link. So, Michael, what is the missing link?
Well, the missing link that we're going to talk about is cleaning up free radicals through the Nrf2 pathway by using the Nrf2 pathway. And there's been some recent science, well, I shouldn't say recent, it was discovered probably around 2005, but as it came along, they've developed some things that help speed up cleaning up the cell and getting rid of oxidative stress. And in everything, it's about keeping that cell clean and keeping the mitochondria healthy and the in and out of that. And if you have that, I mean, in a real efficient manner, you have a different human, a different horse, and a healthier horse. And because that's the beginning of all inflammation, the accumulation of free radicals, and inflammation in horses is always the problem. So it's just that there is science now that brings in a link that we didn't have before. So it's I call it the new game. You know, it's a cell management, the management of our cells and understanding free radicals and oxidative stress and how to manage that.
What is the link between free radicals and oxidative stress then?
What is the link?
The link between free radicals and oxidative stress.
Well, you start to accumulate free radicals, you end up with oxidative stress. And so it's it's like the rusting of iron. It's the oxidation, it's oxygen that oxidizes in the cell, and you need to eliminate that. And when that accumulates, it becomes a problem. And if it, and especially in horses, because everything moves so fast, and if they aren't, if there's an accumulation, there's pretty much an immediate problem. We've talked about oxidative stress causes malfunction and the degeneration of the cell, and it's absolutely, I mean, that's it in a nutshell. That's what it does.
So where do the free radicals come from?
Well,
they collecting free radicals. Where do we collect them from?
We collect them by the millions every day, everything we do. I mean, any kind of stress, any kind of, toxins that enter the body. It doesn't matter what it is, it causes free radicals. It could be anything, but I mean, I could go through a list. We'll go through a list a little bit later of exactly what brings about those free radicals. It's dozens of things.
Okay, that would be great. So I think our audience would certainly want to know how to identify free radicals so they can, avoid them.
Well, we've seen lots of examples of how when you eliminate free radicals in horses, especially, and in people and in dogs and everything, we've seen the examples of what happens when you eliminate the free radicals and you have free flow and you have healthy mitochondria. I mean, it's one of the simplest things you can do, because you can do it with a supplement that removes free radicals and ups glutathion and superoxide dismutase and catalase, and they figured out how to do that now, and we just do that with horses, and you immediately have a new horse.
So we see that oxidative stress contributes to inflammation, which causes disease and then causes aging. So what you're saying is if we sort of distill it back, instead of just keep moving forward along the disease and the aging process, we can actually turn it around, reverse it.
Just cleaning up that mitochondria and keep cleaning up that cell and keeping those free radicals out of there. You've eliminated all the problem pretty much. I mean, there's lots of other factors that can be other things, but it's the simplest thing you can do. Just keep that antioxidant oxidant equilibrium. You've got the answer right there. I mean, if your antioxidants are taking care of the oxidants in a balanced way, and it's all about balance. Everything's about balance in the body. Not too much of this or too little of that. If you keep it balanced, and of course we're really bad at that because we're modifying our food and we have a lot of toxins, and so this science of keeping that cell clean has become way more important today than it was 60 years ago. I mean, everything pretty much 60, 70 years ago was organic, but since we've changed to industrial farming, everything isn't organic anymore. And we've gone to all kinds of medicines and all kinds of toxins in our food and in horses' feed. And so we have a different human and a different horse today than we did 60 years ago, 70 years ago.
Because we have different food. Yes.
Well, and it's lost its nutrition. I mean, the food doesn't have it's probably got, in a lot of cases, as little as 15% as much nutrition in it that it did then. And maybe if you're lucky and you got good stuff, you might get 50, 60% as they did back. Or if you have really virgin land where you're cutting your hay and it gets, the nutrients get replaced, then you've got feed. But when you're lacking nutrients and you've got more free radicals firing at you, I mean, it's pretty tough.
So you mentioned the antioxidants, or the oxidants versus the antioxidants. So we have two different types of antioxidants, apparently, direct and indirect. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, antioxidants that are outside of the body, I mean, that come in from the outside, it's something you eat. And those antioxidants, they're one-on-one, meaning that one antioxidant removes one free radical. The antioxidants that your body produces, and if you can make your body produce more antioxidants, one antioxidant takes out 1 million free radicals, a second, I mean, or less. And so you can, if you can make your body produce a lot of antioxidants, you can eliminate the free radical problem quite quickly.
That's quite staggering.
And that's what this whole science is about. That's the missing link, is being able to do that and speeding up the process. So you speed up anti-aging. I mean, you prevent anti-aging, you prevent inflammation. You can keep things rolling the way they're supposed to be.
Well, we all want to prevent aging, don't we? Well,
absolutely. It's a lot about anti-aging. I mean, the healthier you keep yourself and the healthier you keep a horse, the longer he's going to live and the longer his performance life is going to be. And I mean, it's as simple as that. I mean, if there's constant creation of free radicals and slow removal of those free radicals, or never really removing them, in the end they die. They inflame to death. Most horses retire because of inflammation.
Gosh. So let's look more at this Nrf2 science then, and see what we can do to reverse that.
Well, they have we call it a thermostat in every cell by utilizing the Nrf2 pathway. you can keep those cells normal. And I mean, it's just, we call it biosecurity. If you do that all the time, you've got a sound horse all the time. It's hard to do because, I mean, especially a performance horse, if you're hauling them and all kinds of different things. But when you do that, you do, you you boost their immune system, you keep their immune system strong, and that's how you do it. Keep those free radicals out of there, keep them rolling, and it'll, and that in turn increases their stamina, so they have the ability to bounce back and to keep, to do what they need to do. A horse takes a lot of strain when he's performing. I mean, his temperature doubles and his heart rate goes from 8 to 10 beats per per minute to 120, 150.
Wow.
So you increase, and also when you have all that mitochondria working correctly and that energy going in and out of those cells, you're going to increase their endurance. You're going to have a more high performing animal. And you can, the thing about it is doing this, people though in like race horses and people who need quick response horses, it's the most important thing you can do.
So with that going on, quick recovery would be very important to get that normalized.
Yeah, that's what I said. That recovery time is, especially if you're doing a few events and you need them, to keep performing. That recovery time and is really important. And and it's not only, it's in the recovery time when they're done performing, if that mitochondria and that body is, that energy is moving correctly, that horse will be normal in a few minutes. If it's not, he can, he have a hard time, taking him a while, and he'd come back and he'll have sore muscles, and he'll have, what we call muscle stress, and it take him a lot longer to get back to normal. And when they come right back to normal, you're doing the right thing. And it, all it goes along with it is their increased agility, because they're not bound up by anything. Everything's moving good. So
they're like performing and recovering all almost simultaneously, you're saying?
It all goes. You get the stamina, you get the endurance, you get the recovery time, you reduce the muscle stress, and you have more agility. You just have a way better horse.
Well, that would certainly be important for a competing horse.
Yeah.
And
then we didn't even, I didn't talk about the focus and the concentration, but it's just like everything we do. If our mind is clear and we feel good, it's a lot easier to stay in focus and have the concentration it takes to do what you do. And horses, they get used to doing what they're doing, and boy, they can focus. But if they're off a little bit and they're stressed and in competition and in any way, I mean, like a barrel horse, if that horse is not concentrating and he's a little off and he's a little worried about maybe the lights or the noise or the this or the that, and he can't concentrate, he's going to lose a second or a couple of seconds, which in horse competitions, a second or a little bit more strength is the whole deal. So
you could put the rider at risk as well, not just
absolutely. Yeah, because he's not paying attention to what he's doing. Yeah, absolutely.
So then all that contributes to controlling that inflammaging, which you mentioned. Yes.
Yeah, it's all about inflammaging. I mean, if you keep a horse inflamed, and it's easy for him to be inflamed, and he'll stay. If he's inflamed for a long period of time, he's going to age quickly. If you don't ever get that inflammation out of him, really get it out of him and keep it clean, he's going to age, and eventually he's going to be sore and crippled and swollen knees and whatever. But
sounds like an expensive vet bill to me.
Yeah, and vet bills are expensive, boy. That's what you want to eliminate. And that's how you can do it, by keeping this, just keeping that horse clean. Of course, we said we could talk about causes of oxidative stress. Of course, there's all kinds of causes, but in the I've mentioned most of these as we go along here, but in the psychological stress, the confinement's a terrible thing. Some horses do it fine with confinement. Some are really, really stressed. I mean, you'll see horses, they do what they call cribbing. They'll be chewing the corral down, they'll be eating the wood in the corral, and they do, they're nervous, or in their stall. And lights and noise and being constrained, it just depends on the horse. Every horse is different, like humans, but those are some of the things that cause oxidative stress. And physical stress, competition, just the competition itself, and exercise, the exercise and where they're comfortable. And of course, travel is always a problem, because everything changes when you travel. We call those horses that travel a lot, that some of these barrel people and ropers and different people that pull horses thousands of miles, some of those horses are bulletproof. They can just get in that trailer and go. They're just fine. They're comfortable as can be. And those are the winners. Those are the ones that produce world champions. But that travel thing, the change of water, the change of food, that up and down, that the fumes, it all contributes. And so to oxidative stress. Environmental stress, of course, air pollution. And air pollution, where some of these racetracks are and stuff, horses are real sensitive. They got real big lungs, and one of the biggest problems is respiratory diseases in horses, and respiratory problems is always a problem, because they breathe such huge amounts of air, and it's in and out and in and out. And if there's a lot of pollution in that, if you're near big highways and stuff, there's a lot of cyanide. There's all kinds of particles that affect, and some of them are accumulative. They can't, they'll accumulate. And then of course odors, and of course when in travel, odors, there's urine and fumes from a truck and all the different stuff, and that affects them. The noise, some horses are not affected by noise, but some are, every little noise bothers them. And of course we mentioned predators here, but
So oxidative stress is not just physiological, it affects their behavior as well?
Oh, absolutely. No doubt about it. I mean, it changes their behavior. If you don't have that clean cellular movement, it'll completely change their behavior. They can be mean, they can be unruly, they can be constantly nervous. And most of that is about having that oxidative stress out of there, and when you remove the oxidative stress and they have proper nutrition, you have a gut that is settled down, and all of those signals come from the gut that controls horses. So it all works together. Of course, everything needs to be balanced.
Well, we're learning a lot about gut health in humans, and I suppose then stands to reason that horses would have gut issues that would affect their health. You mentioned balance, so gut's part of the balance.
Just to do that, 80 to 90% of racehorses have ulcers. Actually, they claim, the racehorse people say they all have ulcers, but 60% of all performance horses, including eventers, jumpers, Western performance horses, have ulcers, and 30 to 40% of all dressage horses develop ulcers. So any kind of competition develop ulcers. But if you keep that oxidative stress out of them, and keep that mitochondria moving, and you'll reduce that chance of ulcers by tons. In fact, I've seen them completely go away, even in a racehorse. And the thing about racehorses, they use 2-year-olds. 2-year-olds is a big deal in the race industry, and that's when they're the most vulnerable, because they don't have a fully developed immune system, and they don't have a fully developed I mean, a really fully developed gastronomical system, and so they're really vulnerable to ulcers. And in the United States, we have about a little over 9 million horses, and 10% of those horses will colic in every 12-month period, and that's pretty amazing, and that's bad, and that's because they're confined. Most of the horses, I mean, a huge part of the horses are confined, and usually a turnout horse doesn't colic unless you bring him in a lot, maybe, but so colic is a big problem.
They're very social animals then.
Yeah, and Cushing's disease, that's all part of that. I mean, that's all part of that oxidative stress and not keeping everything clean, because it's a pituitary gland, and the pituitary gland is like the pivotal point of everything a horse does. And so it takes a lot of stress. And I've read several studies. We've written here that 50% of horses over 14 years of age will experience some level of Cushing disease, and that's probably at least that. I mean, some people say only 35%, but in this day and age, it'd be probably closer to 50%. And but you could eliminate that if you keep that Nrf2 pathway open and working real good. So we talked about competition horses with ulcers. They have ulcers. So race horses they're the worst. So, and I spent a lot of time at the track, and I've watched these horses, and if you change that, and you can change it, it's the funniest thing. You remove that oxidative stress, and you know that within, I mean, so fast you can't believe it. Sometimes 10 days to 2 weeks, those ulcers start to go away, and you immediately have a different horse.
Hey, such good news, because I know humans with ulcers, and it seems like they never go away. And I'm thinking of some family members and the drugs they had to take, and the dietary restrictions, and it's quite debilitating having an ulcer. So you certainly don't want that in a performance horse. And you don't
Well,
want
we do it backwards. I mean,
drugs.
you just named what you do. You do it backwards. You go get those drugs and that stuff, and that isn't how you can't cure an ulcer that way. It has to be done naturally and holistically to get that gut correct. You can't change the the metabolic gut with drugs. It just doesn't work.
You can't have a drugged up racehorse either. So
no, and you can't drug horses. I mean, they do, but the worst thing you can do is mess with that gut. Yeah, I mean, it's got to have the right nutrition, and that's what causes it. So, but laminitis and inflammation, sore hocks and heels, nervousness, unruly behavior, hormonal issues, it all comes from oxidative stress, every bit of it. So the ability to remove that oxidative stress and keeping that mitochondria clean will pretty much heal all those problems.
And laminitis and inflammation. Well, laminitis, that in and of itself, I mean, that's an indicator that something's wrong somewhere. It's not just a hoof problem. It's an indication there's something wrong with the horse. Is that right?
No, it's a feed thing. It's laminitis comes from excesses of whatever feed. Too much of the wrong. I mean, like if you throw the grass over, if you cut your grass and you throw it over to your horses, you can cause a little bit of laminitis. I mean, a horse will eat himself to death. If he gets in the granary, he'll literally eat himself to death. And he'll end up with laminitis that will put him down. It'll kill him sometimes. And we've turned him around. Just by removing the oxidative stress and doing the things that they do, the standard protocol, but and then throwing in that strong oxidative stress removal, we've turned them around faster than vets can believe.
That's
But
phenomenal.
same thing with sore hocks and heels. I've been to the ropers, watched the ropers, and they end up with sore hocks and heels because they rope and rope and rope, and pretty quick they got a horse. And they'll do cortisone and all this. They'll do these shots, but if you keep them on, if you keep that, you remove that oxidative stress normally. Unless you really overuse them, you can keep that horse he can do a lot more without having sore hocks and heels than he would ever do without doing that. So
Interesting. So a little more about laminitis, perhaps, because that is it's just so prevalent.
yeah, it's all about the free radicals. But the thing about everything goes to a horse's feet. It's the weakest spot in the horse because it's at the bottom of the leg, and all that blood in the horse has to pump clear through the whole circulatory tree, but it has to go up and down those legs. And if there's blockage at that, in that hoof, in those capillaries in that hoof and all that, you end up with, laminitis. Their hoof wall, that whole wall, fall right off. I mean, it'll turn that. Sometimes it'll turn that coffin bone, and boy, that it's bad. But and they're done. I mean, a lot of times if that coffin bone turns a little bit, it's pretty hard to change. There are people who work on that, but if it's too much, you can't change it. It separates the lamina. There's a weakness in the hoof that you can't get back. So it's the most common affliction to horse hooves. And we've done things with Don Gregory, who produces Hoof Alive, and he understands that real good. He's watched hundreds of them, and you can tell when a horse is, you can just look at a horse's history every year. I mean, they grow a new hoof every year, but if you see those lines around that hoof, those little bumps, you know that he had a little bit too much of something, and he had a little bit of laminitis as he went along. And it's common. I mean, you'll see it because you just turn them out in the spring too much. They get too much green grass. You'll end up with a little bit of laminitis. So it's something you have to regulate and watch.
Really keep an eye on.
You got to keep an eye on it.
Just a little more on inflammaging. I think that's fascinating. It probably, I don't know, people wouldn't hear much going to their vet about inflammation and the correlation with disease. What do you think?
Well, there's a lot more inflammaging in horses that are confined. The more confined they are, the more inflammaging they'll be, because they don't get the movement and they don't get that fresh feed, and they're not eating that grass, and they're not foraging the way horses should forage 12, 14, 16 hours a day. That chewing action produces saliva that protects their gut. And when you just feed them hay and they're done with it in 20, 30, 40, 50 minutes, an hour, even if they eat it out of a hay bag, it's not the same. And so you create more oxidative stress, and oxidative stress is inflammaging. And so those horses don't live as long normally. Confined horses that are kept in stalls and in small acreages, they just, as opposed to horses that are turned out in bigger acreages and mostly get their nutrition from being turned out, those horses just are healthier. I see it. I mean, I traveled hard for 2 years, and I was in 700 corrals and a lot of ranches, and it's all about, you can see the health of a horse, the different healths of horses just by their environment. It's simple.
Well, it's true humans, isn't it? So it sort of makes sense.
Same thing, exactly the same thing. Horses are just the precursor to humans. So
Well, here we see them together enjoying themselves. And, as you said, some horses are more prone to preferring a little bit of isolation. Maybe horses are introverted and extroverted, sort of like humans. But here we see all these horses running together. Um, that's just gorgeous to see.
Well, horses are a little bit different than humans in that they're not garbage eaters, number one. And
Yeah.
humans are garbage. We eat we're garbage eaters. Basically, I call it garbage eating because our food is so bad. But horses basically are pretty clean eaters. So unless we feed them something that isn't clean, or they eat, they live in a chemical environment of some sort. But they have a real fast system. If they get, like, I've seen a horse get an infection and in 72 hours you had to put him down. He's gone.
Well,
And but if in the middle of that 72 hours you put the right thing in him, man, I'm telling you, a few hours, 8, 10, 12, 16 hours, you start to see him turn back around and he'll come out of it. And sometimes in a day or 2 days, he's almost back to normal. I mean, it's because their system works so fast and all their cellular structure is so touchable so quick. It's amazing how you can turn one around. But they're like humans, it just depends on what it is. But they can be at death's door in a few hours, or they can be right back to normal. And we saw that at the racetrack with horses tying up. I mean, when a horse tied up, I mean, that's a bad deal. It's a strain on their system beyond belief. And if you bring them back and you take that oxidative stress out of them and you get them on real clean feed, I've seen those horses come out of it in 24 hours, in 36 hours, 48 hours, they're almost back to normal. And when we did that with horses at the track, they were amazed because some of those horses, normally they would tell me that it would take anywhere from 7 to 30 days to get them back where they could really exercise them again and do anything with them. And we had them back in hours, but not that they paid it much attention. I mean, I don't know why, but it was a simple answer.
well,
But they don't understand that some of the feed they're feeding them is full of glyphosate, and they don't get the whole thing very good. And and habits are hard to break. But that tying up thing at the track is a big problem.
it's such a shame to destroy such a beautiful animal needlessly. If they are in
Yeah.
pain and they can't be turned around, then that is the humane solution. But no, I'm hearing too many stories of horses that have been saved and turned around and gone on to live healthy, productive
Well, they
lives.
had Santa Anita racetrack last year. I don't know how many horses they put down, quite a few. I don't know, 24, 28, 30. I don't know how many it was. And they had to put them down. These are 2 and 3 year old horses. And they blamed it on the track and drugs. But the truth is, I wrote a paper on it and sent it, and I had about a dozen that went through Stephanie Seneff in Boston, a scientist in Boston. She issued that paper I wrote to about a dozen different biologists and veterinarians and lab guys, and they agreed with me that those horses just had too much going against them, and they were weakened. And the first thing that goes, I mean, they have those little bitty legs holding up 900 to 1,200 pounds of horse. And the first thing that'll go wrong, of course, is something in that leg, and be a hoof or, a knee or whatever, a bone problem. And it all comes about because of the oxidative stress that they accumulate, the weakness of those areas. And it's because of what they're feeding them. And of course, some of the drugs they put in them are not good. And the water they're drinking, they wouldn't tell us there if that was that water was city water. It'd be full of fluoride. That's really hard on them. it's toxic. And the air, they're not that far from the freeway. I mean, they're that bad air, so everything's going against them. And but they want to blame it on something else. You know, they don't want to blame it on the environment or the feed they're feeding them. So, but it is what it is. Not that I'm smart or a veterinarian, or I'm not a veterinarian. I'm nothing. I'm just observing. That's all I'm doing. So
I think experience speaks quite large.
Well,
yes.
You run down the road and you see a lot of problems, and you know, we solved a lot of problems in a lot of places, and that veterinarians didn't solve. But it wasn't that the veterinarian didn't know what he was doing. It was just that he wasn't aware of the environment like we were. We were looking at every factor. We're looking at the air. We're looking at the electro. One place I went, the horses were pretty unhealthy, and the guy couldn't get his horses healthy. Well, he had these huge electric lines going right over the top of his corral. I said, "Hey, man, that's throwing off their whole being there. That's your problem." In another place, it was gas from the oil wells. I said, "Man, these women had all their horses; their lungs were bleeding when they were competing." I said, "It's from that gas." And I mean, it's in another place it was selenium. I said, I don't think these horses are getting any selenium. Have you done a mineral test on these horses? And after he did that, he said, "Man, we didn't have any selenium." So
they're sort of like the canary in the coal mine of what's going on.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
What's affecting horses is affecting humans as well.
Oh, absolutely.
So we need to pay attention to the health of these horses who can't speak for themselves. They trust us to look after them.
Yeah.
And there's correlation here, isn't there?
And we can watch it. I mean, we can see it in living color. I mean, it's right in front of us. So when you solve the problem, it's like, oh, okay. I mean, not that it sounds simple what we're talking about, and it is simple. I mean, it's the first thing you do. It's the easiest thing to do. I mean, there are a lot of other things that can be wrong and whatever, but this is the way to begin and to get a horse quickly in that metabolically healthy. Or at least working in a correct way so that you can figure out the other problems. I mean, there can be all kinds of shortages or, in the nutrition and everything else, but that you can't correct doing this. But this is a way to do some easy correction. Is just keeping that oxidative stress out of those cells. And you do that, pretty much everything else will kind of follow suit. It makes everything else easier to heal and every other problem easier to solve once you have that, you're in that thing. I mean, maintaining a horse with a supplement that removes oxidative stress is as simple as feeding the horse every day. If you just do that, you're definitely going to have a healthier horse.
Well, it sounds foundational. It sounds like the foundation to build upon.
It is the foundation. Yeah, because that's where, that mitochondria is where that horse receives all of his energy, and or at least 65% of his energy, they say, from the mitochondria. It's at least that. It might be 75% in most cases, but so you keep that clean and you keep that moving, and they in and out, and you've got a healthy horse. So
let's look at this Nrf2 activation a little bit more then, so we understand that.
Yeah, it's a protein messenger. Everything's about the protein, So it's a cellular normalizer and a thermostat, that Nrf2 activator. It's just absolutely a thermostat in the cell. And it regulates over 600 survival genes. It downregulates and upregulates the right genes automatically. So it's an antioxidant. Nrf2 activator is an antioxidant, or it produces antioxidants. So antifibrotic, anti-inflammatory.
So you get
you keep all that clean. That's what you gain. You gain an antioxidant, antifibrotic quality, and anti-inflammation. That's the name of the game.
And in relation to DNA, I'm hearing more and more that we can actually affect our DNA. We used to think that our DNA was like the blueprint. Your blueprint was different from my blueprint. There was nothing you could do about it. Whatever your ancestry was, my ancestry was. My grandmother died of heart disease, then I was going to die of heart disease. But we're hearing more and more now that we can actually affect our DNA. We can actually correct it so that our family history doesn't have to be our future health. Is that the same for horses too? Do they?
Well, we didn't realize we had so much DNA in our microbiome. So when you straighten out that microbiome, you're affecting DNA more than anything else. So when you say you affect,
you can get.
yeah. When you say you affect your DNA, you straighten out that microbiome, you keep that oxidative stress out of there, you're affecting that DNA on a very large scale. So that's new science. I mean, that's the science of today, is the gut-brain axis, and it's no different in a horse than in a human.
So we're mammals, so I guess there's that link there.
Yeah, and the great thing about upregulating Nrf2 is that you upregulate the production of glutathione by the body, and by like 300% in, I don't know, 30 or 60 days, I guess. We don't know for sure how fast it is in horses as we do in humans, but so you gain everything just from the glutathione alone. You'll increase their energy and their stamina and their endurance, and we talked about all that, quicken their recovery time. That glutathione is that's the master antioxidant. And so,
well, that's powerful, isn't it? That our body can produce that.
Absolutely, and you can do it quickly. I mean, and everybody is a little glutathione deficient, so you get in there and in that Nrf2 pathway, and and do the right things, and bam, you've got glutathione, and that right away does all the things that we've listed here. It feeds the muscles, decreases the inflammation, it strengthens the immune system, it detoxifies, detoxify the liver and all the cells, and that's the whole thing, is detoxifying the cells. That's what we're talking about here.
Remove the garbage.
Yeah, and that circulatory tree, that whole cardiovascular function is increased, and there's some new production and good production of nitric oxide and into that cardiovascular system, and you just have a healthier horse.
Well, let's look at a very hot topic, and we're talking about the toxins, the exposures to free radicals. This is certainly a priority free radical, I should think, that needs to be addressed today.
Well, glyphosate is talked about the most because it's the most used chemical in the history of the world. I mean, we dump 220 million pounds of it, or however many million tons of it actually, on the United States every year. And so it's in everything. And it depends on how it goes into the horse and the horse's physical makeup and biological makeup. It'll do different things to different horses. I mean, to everything, humans or horses. But it accumulates, and it's an absolute. It was patented as a antibiotic at one point, and by Monsanto. And so the bad part about it being an antibiotic and going into the gut is it kills the good bacteria and it feeds the bad. and it weakens the laminin in that cell wall, which is only a cell thick anyway, and then you got a leaky gut, and that's how you end up with ulcers in horses and everything else. And it alters, it affects everything. I mean, it affects the amino chain. It can do a lot of different things, and it can accumulate in the brain. Even it's such a small molecule, it can go through the blood-brain barrier. And alfalfa, unfortunately, like at the racetrack, they feed them, you know, most of the alfalfa that gets there is GMO alfalfa. I mean, there's a lot of alfalfa in the country that isn't genetically modified, but you got to go find it and make sure you've got that non-genetically modified alfalfa. You don't want to be feeding GMO alfalfa to horses, because it'll chelate the minerals out of their system. It'll you know, it'll carry metals to the wrong places in their bodies. It's just a biological wreck. So, and it can be in a lot of the grain.
Mm.
In fact, most feeds, you'd be hard pressed to find. I mean, there's feeds out there that claim there's no glyphosate in it, but they're very few, and they're expensive. So you got to hunt it down. And if you're feeding them every day, feed with glyphosate in it, people say, well, it doesn't have very much. It's so minute that it can't affect them. It only takes 2 parts per billion to make a breast tumor grow. So it doesn't take much to affect, to make an adverse effect on a horse. I mean,
That's an astonishing statistic, isn't it? Gosh.
yeah. And I mean, you know, an endocrine disruption, that's its master. I mean, it messes up the endocrine system. And you know, it's just not a good thing. The tying up thing, of course, I talked about the tying up. Glyphosate is a big factor in that. That's the first thing I told those guys. You got to get them off that alfalfa. You got to find them some hay that doesn't have anything in it, that any of that glyphosate in it, because that's one of the first steps towards that tying up. You got to get that glyphosate out of their body, and really, if you're not feeding it to them, you know, it becomes, it's not being, at least it's not pumping through the system and doing all the things that it does. It's just it stops all that immediately if you pull that glyphosate away from them, and they pretty much come back to normal pretty quick. I mean, it might affect them down the road because it's accumulated somewhere, and it's weakened some things. I mean, that's what happens to those horses at the track. The glyphosate weakens those capillaries those real thin capillaries down in that hoof wall, you know, between the hoof wall and that holds the hoof wall together, all those little bitty capillaries down there. And the same thing in the lungs. That's why their lungs bleed, because it weakens those little capillaries in the lungs. Mm-hmm. And as soon as they're stressed, they bleed. And that's what happens to horses, the race horses. That's what they give them. They Lasix them. They use Lasix to try to stop that bleeding. And Lasix is really hard on horses. They say it's not, but it's hard on them. And that bleeding comes from weakened capillaries in the end, those little bitty capillaries in the end of those lungs. And boy, when the minute a horse tastes blood and he's in a race, he just kind of backs off. I mean, if he tastes blood, he slows down, and they know that. So they try to stop that. But if they'd stop the, you know, the glyphosate and some of the things that weaken those capillary walls, they wouldn't have that problem.
We want to stop the bad stuff coming in and then repair from the inside out.
Exactly.
And really restore the horse.
Yeah, he'll restore quickly if you don't feed him something that keeps weakening. I mean, those endothelial cells will strengthen right up because he's a vegetarian. And I mean, that's what in humans, they figured out that what's his name, that doctor at the unit in Cincinnati, I can't think of his name. Anyway, he worked with Dr. Campbell, but Colin Campbell. They starts with an E. Anyway, he he had the most successful heart um, trials that were ever done. He cured 179 people with chronic heart disease in 3 years, and all the heart disease went away. But just by feeding them right, I mean,
Well, someone once said, "We are what we eat."
exactly. We are exactly and what we consume and what we breathe, but yeah, we are.
So
We actually
regulating
what
oxidative
we
stress is powerful, isn't it?
we're actually what we metabolize.
Well, that you said that very well. Yes, things have changed since that quote was first introduced. But so the great repair, as well as the great foundation, is regulating that oxidative stress. And you mentioned a couple of ways to do that, but the most effective sounds like the Nrf2 pathway activation. We're looking at these
Yeah,
things here.
yeah, you activate that pathway with a good powerful activator. You reduce that oxidative stress. It says here 40% in 30 days. That's a human thing. We've never tested horses. We don't know exactly how much we reduce, but it's probably more than that. I mean, it's at least that, I'm sure, because I've watched it and I've seen the change in them, and so I know that it's big. And of course, we don't know in horses exactly when you do that oxidative stress thing, open up that Nrf2 pathway, how much glutathione or catalase or superoxide dismutase we produce. But in humans, it's 300% of glutathione, and it increases catalase 54% and superoxide dismutase 30%. And I mean, it's a game changer. That's what I used to. That was my beginning of my talk. Is we've got a game changer, and it is. So.
Well, we need it now more than ever. But certainly for horses, because they've been hit so hard by the introduction of some of our convenient farming methods and other things that people really aren't aware of. So thank you very much, Michael, for introducing us to this great tool to look after our horses, and I suppose possibly dogs as well. They're quite a similar association, a little bit different, but maybe we can talk about that another time. But thank you very much, Michael. Pleasure to have you on today. And if you'd like any more information about any of these topics that were discussed today, message me on whatever medium you're seeing this through, and I can connect you with Michael. My pleasure. And we'll see you next time on All About Horses.
There you go.